Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today to talk all things the Hellborn King. It is going to be spoiler-filled, so if you haven't read the book, don't watch, don't listen. Come back after you've finished it. Chris, you want to give us an introduction?
Oh, there's two Chris's, but since I'm in the top right position, I'll consider it's me. My name is Chris Mohan. I have a YouTube channel where I sometimes make videos, but occasionally have been appearing on Steve's. We've just finished House of the Dragon this week, which was good fun, and one to get the end of. And actually, I think sort of leads into Hellborn King quite nicely.
Definitely. And the man of the hour, Christopher G. Brenning.
I am Christopher G. Brenning, author of the Hellborn King saga, hiker of trails, drinker of bourbon. So good evening to you all.
Nice. And we were just talking before we went live about, it's a chunky book, but it didn't feel like a chunky book. It read really, really easily. You think so too, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a sort of one of those weird kind of, I wouldn't say a reading slump because I was still reading, but everything just felt like I was trying to force my way through it. And then I'd say after about 3 or 4 chapters of this, it was kind of like, right now, this is rolling off the page. And considering it's sort of thematically supposed to be heavy, it didn't read that way at all, which I think was quite unusual. It wasn't what I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I try to make the writing as accessible as possible and not make it overly flowery or, overly complicated because if I can't read it, I don't want to write it. And so because I get very burnt out quickly with reading, I just wanted to make it as easy, to read, have it flow off the page. Well, have lots of white space on my pages, and then a nice font size and all that good stuff to just make it visually appealing to the eye. And, I try to keep the chapters fairly concise. The chapters are a bit shorter in Wrathbringer, but I mean, there's a couple of chapters in Hellborn King that are like in the 10,000 word range, but I try to keep them around like 4,000 to 6,000, just so you don't feel like you're slogging through it.
Yeah, that's one of the things good short chapters are always great, but like because I read this on Kindle, and when you check the kind of chapter length, to see do you read this chapter or go to sleep, or do you that kind of thing, and you kind of go, oh no, this is a big chapter, so you kind of have in your head there's stuff going to happen in this chapter, there's a journey in this, and I like those moments where you do have that variation in length, so that you're not kind of going like we read the Expanse. It seems like every Expanse chapter is 10 pages, and it's never going to get too far before it kind of curtails itself and kind of goes, oh, we're going to stop you right there and then move on to something else. And that sort of gets frustrating after a while, whereas, that mixture, I think really works well for telling a longer form story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then certain characters have certain styles built into the chapter. Like Lucetta, for example, her is more like horror suspense. Mm-hmm. And so for suspense reading, you generally want to keep the chapters shorter, so that it keeps that more frantic pace going. Madeline, I think she has the longest chapters in the book because she's got such a big story, and certain characters like Damien Dreadfire are told through other characters' eyes. So it's like sometimes I don't have a choice but to make this chapter a little longer because I'm trying to get in more of what's going on with him.
Yeah, that makes sense. John's here. Hey, John. Yeah, first one here. I brought my lawn chair and drinks.
How's it going, John?
And Jeremiah, very much not a slog.
Excellent. Glad to hear that.
I guess you could call it a slurp.
Slurp.
That was nice. You time drinking there, Christopher.
Yeah. I'm gonna pretend I planned it that way. So.
Yeah. I Anonymous is here. Author I Anonymous. Yeah, not a fan of overly consistent book format. Yeah. And the prologue, I think, sets up what you're trying to do with the book. I think it lets you know this is the kind of story you're going to have. So the prologue, I always love a good prologue, and this one was kind of, I did not expect things to go the way they did. So I was like, okay, let's do this. Kind of like buckle in.
Yeah, I really wanted to, as a debut author, I really wanted to punch you in the face like right off the bat, and so you're like, whoa, this is the real deal. This is something a bit different, because prologues are usually, for cramming in excess world building, or a lot of people skip prologues just because they're not necessary. But I wanted to make mine very much useful to the story. And then you go from prologue to chapter 1, and you're in that same space. It's just you switch perspectives. So chapter 1, which is Einar's chapter, you're catching the tail end of the battle. And I wanted to format all my battles that way, where it starts on one side and ends on the other. But speaking to the prologue, that actually was not the original prologue. The prologue started sort of in the aftermath of the battle, and I had been querying agents with that prologue, and I got maybe like, I don't know, 50 rejections from agents, but there was one agent who actually gave me some personalized feedback and says, your writing is good. I just think you're starting in the wrong place. And so I was like, okay, well, why don't I try redoing this? So I threw out about 80% of the prologue and rewrote it in 2 days. And what you see in Hellborn King is what I came up with. And I like getting that little bit of feedback and starting it off where I started it, where it's still in sort of the aftermath, but it's, you got these two guys, they brought their army out. They're looking at the site of a massacre, trying to figure out what's going on. And so like suspense, like right off the bat, lots of questions that need to be answered. So I had a blast writing it. And I think it's some of my best work, dare I say.
Yeah. It must create, because it is universally talked about, obviously, Christopher, anybody that's read it talks about the prologue. And a couple of things about it. One, nobody ever says what it is exactly they like about the prologue, so I kind of have it in my head what I think, and I assume that everybody else likes the same thing about it, but for me, it's very much setting up that kind of in the face of death, man's true nature comes out. Of who they are. It's not really the end of it. It's like, I'm going to be this person, but actually when it comes to it, and it kind of follows through the rest of the book, this kind of son of the successful general kind of person is not their father. And their kids are not their father, and actually they're not the ones that did the great deeds. They live on the result of what somebody did beforehand. And actually that kind of sniveling kind of bit of pleading was like, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Well, I mean, he was defiant up until the point where he knew he's like, I'm dying and there's no way I'm getting out of this. And then, his resolve kind of breaks. But I mean, like it starts off, a little bit of mystery, a lot of questions. And then I sprinkle in a little bit of world building in between the dialogues. You're getting to know the characters and everything. And just when you're starting to get to know them, bang, the ambush happens, and there's death and chaos everywhere. And I really let's see, one person told me I completely pulled the rug out from underneath them. Another friend of mine said that their younger son who was reading it, I actually made him cry because he was getting to like the characters so much. Yes.
Got him.
Yep, got him.
Hopefully they were very young.
Yeah, scarred for life.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, this is our main character in this battle, and he's gonna survive. And then no, it didn't go that way.
No.
Yep. And we'll have to get into some more things later after you guys read Wrathbringer, because like I'm trying not to give away too much now in this stream. So.
But that was going to be one of my questions. Without having read Wrathbringer, with me, myself and Steve have said, like, I was determined not to start it, because if I had it kind of going, I will start it, and thought, no, I'll run out of questions because I'll know the answers, if you know what I mean. It must have made writing the prologue for Wrathbringer very, pressurized, challenging, all that kind of stuff to kind of meet that expectation.
Absolutely. I was stressing out about it because I'm like, man, I wrote this really cool prologue that a lot of people like. How do I one up it, or how do I even match it? Like, I'd be okay with just matching it. And so it took me a long time to finish that one, but I'm kind of getting my style and my flow together now, because I wrote the prologue for book 3 in 2 days.
Right. Okay.
So
Wow.
Yeah, it's coming along. But yeah, I mean, that prologue, I have it up for free on my website. I have the audio version of it free on my YouTube channel. You can check it out if you haven't yet. And I think it's going to hook you right off the bat. I think it's going to hook you, and it's going to give you a good sense of what to expect throughout the whole rest of the book.
Nice. And Anonymous said, yes, the prologue was great.
Thank you.
And Jeremiah says, sets the mood perfectly. And poor Cedric.
Well, poor Cedric only to a certain point, because he's not a man without sin himself, and he was the man responsible for the bloodbath at Borgifa, which is a mystery which is going to be kind of drip fed out throughout the series. You're going to find out more and more of what happens. That's going to give you a better perspective of motivations, why the war started. It might give you a little better idea of who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, I want to touch on that here in a second, but just go through these couple of comments. That switch from defiance to pleading when the realization that death was coming was good.
Thank you.
And Anonymous agrees. Yes, of course. And John, hail to Christopher Brenning, hail to the hosts. Thanks for coming.
Hey, John.
And I think a running theme in the story is because you hear different sides of this battle and what happens, and the people who were there, they're kind of they were following orders. I think that's kind of a theme, is that they didn't really have control. They were just doing what they were told. And if you look through history, that happens a lot. I mean, people do some awful things just because they're following orders and they don't really stop to think about it. I think having is it Inar? The site, the Einar. I always get names wrong. Having him as the kind of the conscience a little bit, I think he's almost like our eyes in the book, because he has a sense of he has, are we going too far? Are we becoming what we're fighting? I think that's his character was a nice little a way for us to balance that out.
Yeah, his character originally started off with a different name and totally different personality and motivations. Originally, when I was first planning out the book, the barbarians were, they were just like a caricature of themselves. They were just trying to one up each other and see who could be the most brutal, this and that. And then I was just like, this is just really stale. I'm not jiving with this. And so I threw out that first chapter and rewrote a bunch of it. And I was like, what if, because the barbarians are always supposed to be the bad guys, right? So I was like, what if I put a character in that is like the noble savage, the pious one, the one who's here out of a sense of duty to, to his tribe, to his people, to the neighboring tribes, that they're close with. And, he's torn between that sense of duty and not agreeing with the levels of brutality that are being, perpetrated on the battlefield in the name of vengeance. And so each chapter, you just kind of get to see him break down a little bit more until the point where at the very end, he's just like, I got to walk away from this. I'm literally losing my soul over it.
Yeah, he was my favorite character in the book, because he's presented as a warrior and as a chieftain, nearly almost that he's done it all his life, and then you find it that he's basically just a craftsman, and it's actually building the craft of a war machine that makes him realize who he is at the heart of it. I love that resolution of his character, where it's only in building the ultimate war machine that he kind of goes, actually, my role in this is done, and I've caused enough death and destruction in my own right. And you kind of see the ordinary man, and not the one that's been touched by the violence, so severely, like Damien has, for instance.
Yeah, you're the first person that's ever kind of really pointed that out. And yeah, that's true. I try to give most all of my characters something that they love to do outside the plot. Like Einar, he's a craftsman. He loves to work with his hands. He loves to build things. And then exactly like you said, it's that realization that, I went from building, great halls and all these, beautiful things. And now here I built something ugly. I built something that's just bringing death. This isn't who I am. And then looking at that, and then especially when he has to torch it after the battle's over so that the machine doesn't fall into enemy hands, he's just like, what is this all for?
Yeah.
And that's really when he makes it up in his mind that, all right, I'm done. I'm leaving.
Yeah, and he sort of realizes that war begets war. You keep on fighting, you cause more destruction, more murder. Like when the ultimate massacre of the people within the fort, when they played for their lives and they're just butchered, he kind of goes, this is just great in the next generation or the next battle further on down the line, and what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what I was hoping to go for in the storytelling, and I'm glad you picked up on that.
Cool.
And our friend Layla's here. I'm listening in. I haven't read the book yet, but spoilers are okay. I like listening to Christopher's experience writing the book.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, anybody out there who has questions, whether you're just starting out or you've been around the block a few times, feel free to ask me. You can hit me up on Twitter or my website or whatever, and Be happy to help anybody, because I made so many mistakes writing this book. So many mistakes. Because, I mean, you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world, and you can DM people and try to pick up, you know, little tips and tricks here and there. But you really got to just go through it in order to know, you know, what's right. You know, like, am I doing something right here or something wrong? And so, yeah, you know, any help I can be to anybody, feel free to ask.
Jeremiah commented, Inar is a bit like Floki from Vikings.
Yeah, actually, that wasn't a comparison I was consciously trying to draw, but yeah, I can see that. I mean, at the end of the day, characters are all archetypal, you know.
100%. Yeah.
Like I've had some people tell me that Titan reminds them of the Hound from Game of Thrones, and that wasn't really my intention with that character, to have like my own version of the Hound. But I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I can see why people might think that, the foul language and just, you know, kind of just not caring about anything anymore. But I wanted to give him depth to it. Like, you know, he's been through battle after battle, and he's seen every single person he ever, you know, was cool with and cares about die. And, you know, he's just disenfranchised. He's wondering, you know, like, what's this all for? You know, what am I even doing here? And he's just having that crisis of conscience. And he copes with it through alcohol, through abusing people around him. And he was a character I actually added in sort of last minute. He wasn't on my original sheet of characters I wanted to have. I came up with him during that scene when Madeline is, you know, at Castle Thorn. She's trying to rally whoever they got. She's just trying to scrape together a team. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And just the name popped in my head. And then I just got this idea, this huge gruff guy who can really just butt heads with her. And I just kind of explored that and ended up blossoming into what it is. And now he's on the cover of book 2.
That's one of the really interesting things, and one of those things that makes me think, God, I could never be a writer. Like, especially like a book like this is multi POV, right? I'd be afraid anything more than 2 character POV is going to be impossible to follow. And yet you had a multi POV story and thought, here's another one, and make it work. You know what I mean? That would be a thought process that I don't think I would ever get my head round, as far as being able to do that and being able to follow it.
Yeah, conventional wisdom from what I've heard for new authors is, if you're going to write a book, especially a fantasy book, don't go with more than 2 POVs, because, you know, you're just starting out. You know, it can get very messy very quickly. So I plotted the first one out fairly well. I still wanted to leave enough wiggle room to add, you know, just a creative idea that just like Titan, for example, it was just an idea. I left room in the plotting for it, but I wanted everything to revolve sort of like a strand of DNA revolving around the central plot of the conflict. And then what I wanted to do to try to breathe more life into it is stack layers and layers of conflict. So you have the big external conflict, the big war between the barbarians and the kingdom. Then I wanted to have some more internal conflict, like the barbarians. Some of these tribes don't get along. In fact, like, you know, with the Zalmacians, they are age-old enemies of the Northmen, but, you know, through haggling and through realizing that, hey, this is kind of for the greater good, you know, enemy of my enemy, they get together, but there's still a lot of conflict there. And then you also have characters' internal conflicts inside their head. Like Lucetta is a perfect example of that. She's just nothing but conflict in her head. And so I wanted to do that and just stack these different layers of conflict to just give the story a lot of depth and make it so that I just never really run out of things to write about, because there's always something going on.
Yeah. We have a comment from Aaron. Hey, everyone listening to the prologue, bumped this series up my TBR. Finished Hellborn King in a day, and I'm holding off on Wrathbringer until after today's chat. Yeah, so are we. We've been holding off. It's been tough.
Wow,
a day. Wow.
Yeah. And our friend Tori from Tori Talks is here. Hi, everyone. I haven't read the book yet, but it's on my TBR. Question for Christopher. What does your outline process look like on a scale of spreadsheets or to non-existent?
I open a Word document and I just kind of just write it out. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I don't know how to use Excel, which don't tell my boss that. But yeah, I'm really bad with Excel. So I just go into Word and like for the Hellborn King, I had one page that was just a list of characters and their physical description. Like, this is their hair color, their eye color, you know, their height, you know, just so I can get a vision in my head of what they are. All the names, I broke it down by faction, and then I had a separate page with my chapter lists. And so I had it broken out into 3 acts, your first, second, third act. And then I have just very rough, like 1 sentence chapter descriptions, like this character does that, or battle happens, or aftermath of battle, or just something like that. So I know, okay, this is the general theme of this chapter. But I just keep it very basic. I try not to plan too far into the future, because if I tell myself the story too much in my own head, by the time it comes to actually write it down, I'm bored with it. And then I really struggle. And I'm looking on my phone, and I'm on YouTube or Twitter, and I'm just trying to find like any excuse not to write, because I already know what's going to happen in my head. So I just like to leave it as open as I possibly can.
Yes. And Jeremiah, at least that is who I pictured in my head. And yeah, I agree about Titan and the Hound, but Titan's journey is a bit different.
Yes.
I didn't picture him in the Hound, but I seen that comment about the Hound. I went, yeah, I mean, I can see it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's archetypal. There's always characters that are going to be like that. But yeah, his journey is first it's reluctance, but then and this is kind of giving a little bit of a spoiler away for Wrathbringer, but not much. But you can kind of see this in Hellborn King, where it starts to go towards more like a redemption arc.
Yeah.
But then you have the fall of Morden and just this crushing sense of failure that comes over him. And one of the unique things I wanted to do with him is I wanted him to have a very close relationship with Madeline that wasn't romantic in any way. I just wanted them to be friends, and she doesn't look at him in any sort of way. He doesn't look at her any sort of way. They're just soldiers, and their bond is on the battlefield. And to me, because there's all sorts of friendships in the book. You have Einar and Damien. You have Sir Edmund and Gareth. You have Madeline and Titan. Madeline and Titan is my favorite combination.
Mm-hmm.
Just because originally he's just very gruff, and he's just like, oh, you're just a stupid girl and this and that. But then, he starts to become protective over her as, the only friend he has left in the world, basically.
Yeah, it's that dual thing of, it is who he is as a person, and he's forgotten that in all of the loss. And I know I put this in a very short wrap up of this, but it's this idea of PTSD, I think, throughout the book, that an awful lot of the characters are suffering from PTSD in some way, and then lose the sense of themselves because of it.
Absolutely. I try to, as tastefully as possible, address a lot of mental health issues in the book. Depression, alcoholism, PTSD, depending on your theory, schizophrenia or something like that, So yeah, I try to do it tastefully. The biggest challenge to do tastefully was Madeline's last chapter, which everybody who's read the book talks about that. Thankfully, I haven't gotten raked over the coals for it, because I try to keep as much of it off the page as possible. Originally, when I was first planning out the book, she was supposed to die in book 1.
Right.
That was like my original, like one of my first ideas for the characters. Like, okay, well, she's gonna die in book 1, but then I'm just like, no, like she has a much bigger story to tell here. But when it came down to it, she gets captured. I'm like, all right, well, how the hell does she get out of this? Because I don't want any of my characters to have plot armor whatsoever. You suffer the consequences of what's coming your way. So I was like, okay, so she can get out of it, but she's not really going to get out of it, And I kind of knew as I was writing the scene that it was heading in this direction, and I didn't want to do it because I love the character and I didn't want to have her suffer like that. But it just kind of led to this conclusion, and I decided I could be shocking. I could really be controversial and upset a lot of people, but I decided I'm just going to imply it and keep as much of that off the page as I possibly can.
I think it was more impactful not having a lot of detail, just kind of, general idea. I think we could all fill in the blanks, but I think that made it more impactful, not knowing every little detail. We know what happens, but it wasn't you get too much in detail and then it becomes something else,
Right. And I didn't want to permanently turn people off from the series, because you get to that and it's like one of the last things you're going to read in the book. And I don't want people to arrive at that and say, I can't go on with this. So I mean, I wanted to do this tastefully as possible and still keep it in the spirit of what I'm trying to build. Where if you make a mistake or if something bad is coming your way, you're not getting out of it. Sorry.
Yeah.
And John's comment was, Chris's best quality is making sure the connective tissue of hope is ever present and the story doesn't devolve into torture porn.
Yeah, John, his review of Hellborn King was really great, and he was one of the first ones, maybe one of the only ones I've heard that really pointed out that yes, this is a grimdark book, and grimdark is known for being bleak and depressing and hopeless, but in my series, people are driven by hope. They don't give up because there's hope that they can make it through. There's hope that they can better themselves, and tomorrow will be a new day. And I very much try to keep that, albeit more in the background, but I do try to keep hope as a driving factor for so many characters, even really screwed up characters like Lucetta. Like she's got a lot of issues, but she's driven by this hope of, even though it's more like a false hope that, hey, I can save the day here, but I'm going to have to get my hands dirty to do it. So even a character like that is really driven by a sense of hope.
Mm-hmm. Jeremiah had a comment. Chris did POVs really well. We get to know the characters, and it wasn't confusing at all.
Well, thank you. I try to give everybody a distinct personality and voice, and then I think titling the chapters the way I title them really helps too, because there's no guessing. There's no guessing who you're reading. It's Gareth. It's Titan. It's you're automatically in the headspace of that character.
Yeah. And Aaron said the multi POV for how each character weaved in is what I think made it such a quick read.
Well, thank you.
And our friend Matt is here from Matt on Books. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Tori, with multiple POVs, how do you keep each character's voice distinct and authentic? Good question.
I think what helps with that is I try to put little pieces of myself in the characters. Full disclosure, Gareth is kind of I wouldn't say a full author insert, but a lot of authors will insert themselves as characters, and they're the cool guy. They're the guy everybody loves, and he can do no wrong, and he saves the day. Where I was like with Gareth, why don't I put all my negative traits into him, and exaggerate them, blow them up. So like the depression, the drinking, the low self-esteem. It's like, okay, I can relate with that. So I'm going to take it and magnify it, and then his journey is going to be overcoming these things that I've had to overcome in my life. And then Einar, I would say, is my conscience, my sense of justice and what's right and wrong. So that's very easy to draw on. Damien, even though you don't get to see through his eyes, he's like sort of like my anger, like blind anger that you have to keep in check. But for him, it's just slowly starting to consume him. So, and then each character, I mean, like Sir Edmund is actually a character based on my best friend Tom. And the interactions that Gareth and Edmund have are actually based on some interactions I've had with him at various low points in my life and various advice he's given me. So, and then other characters are sort of mishmash amalgamations of various people I've known, again, archetypes. So just kind of having all that set in my head, it's pretty easy for me to keep it all straight.
That's interesting about Gareth, because I can't stand him. He's a snivelly, weaselly, it's a bit like a couple of other characters, because he's a representation of myself as well. I think that's why he's like the worst part of me, and I'm like, I really like or dislike how woeful you are, because that could have been me in that same situation, and it's like, I don't like reading that, and you sort of have no redemption in my eyes because you're already pathetic.
Yeah, well, you'll have to read Wrathbringer.
Oh, that's the point. Yeah.
but yeah, it's interesting to me how everybody has a different take on the character. Like everybody has a different take on the characters. Some people really like Gareth, and they like his journey and how he's finding himself and stepping into manhood, even though he's about 10 years late to the party. I have other friends who really like Lucetta, and I know people who absolutely cannot stand Lucetta one bit. I like people who think like John, who thinks that Madeline is one of the as he said, one of the best written female characters that he's ever read. And then I've had other people say that they can't stand her because she's just like I don't know, she maybe not quite a Mary Sue, but she's just like obnoxious in certain ways. So it's like it's very fascinating for me to hear all these different takes on these characters, and it really makes me feel validated that I represented them well enough that people can have this sort of diverse opinion on them.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, but everybody projects something onto every book that they ever read. You know, nobody goes in with a completely blank slate to anything they consume, watch, read at all. So, you know, it's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Tori said, by the way, I love the outline thoughts. I'm similar, and it's nice to hear someone else who writes more flexibly.
Flexibly, sometimes chaotically. I do like to skip around. So sometimes I'll be doing a chapter in Act 1, and then just an image, a scene will pop into my head from Act 3, and then I'll just skip ahead and go right. And sometimes it gets me into trouble because as I'm wrapping up Act 1, Act 2, all of a sudden it's like, well, this isn't going the way I originally intended. Now I got to go back and change it. But still, I mean, I skip around a lot, and I'm glad that I haven't screwed anything up colossally by doing that. So.
Yes. And Jeremiah had a question that I thought of when I was reading, which is, did you base the Bethers or anything specific in history? I got the Normandy vibes from their story.
Nothing specific in history. Some of it is through personal experience, actually, certain family dynamics. And that was a little bit of inspiration that I drew on to try to create something positive out of something that's very negative. So that's more where that inspiration came from than anything historical.
And our friend Bryce for Self-Centered is here. Absolutely love the Hellborn King, and people like John and Mike on Twitter really helped me get into it.
Oh, thanks, Bryce. I'm still looking forward to that interview for that review of the book. I'm really glad you liked it, Bryce. I was really waiting for you to read that one for a while. I was like, because I've been following him for a while on Twitter. He does great work. So yeah, great to have him here.
And our friend John is here. Hello, I made it. I agree, Christopher. It makes sense that hope exists. Otherwise, the characters would lose motivation.
Absolutely.
Bryce says, I love this discussion on hope. It's absolutely true. I forgot it was grimdark until something grimdark happened. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I didn't want to go too over the top with the blood, guts, and all that other stuff. I mean, there are a few scenes, especially in Nightmares, where it's blood and fire and dripping flesh and all this stuff. So I did still want to keep it grimdark, but I didn't want to go overboard to the point where you're literally nauseated reading it. So
yeah, it's happened. Jeremiah says Gareth's relationship with his mother I found very touching. It hit me because my mom passed away recently, and she was a bit like Charlotte in some ways.
Yeah,
sorry to hear that, Jeremiah.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to hear that, and Charlotte is also loosely based on my mother as well. So I'm glad that you could see those sorts of things in that character, because that was a very special character to me.
Aaron, I really enjoyed that you occasionally got the thoughts of the character, and their hopes often shined through there.
And what I also like to do is you're in the thoughts of the character a lot, and I put those in italics so you can tell that this is something that the character is thinking. And sometimes what they're thinking isn't always what they're saying. Like they can say one thing. Like Madeline's a good example. She projects a lot of confidence, but there's a lot of insecurity going on in her head. A lot of second guessing, a lot of self-doubt. But on the outside, it's, I'm a badass. I can conquer any challenge that comes my way. I don't need anybody to help me. I can do it all myself. But then in her head, it's a very different story.
Definitely. Matt says, is it going to be a trilogy, or are you planning for more books?
So far, I'm planning on 5 in the series, looking at doing a prequel, and then maybe like a 3-book spinoff is what I have planned. And that the spinoff will be in the future after the events of the saga.
Okay.
So I have a lot of work to do.
Jeremiah said I liked all the characters. I liked all of the characters except Damien, of course. I like Damien.
I can see why people would dislike him, just because of his brutality and all that. Damien is actually the character I'm most intimately familiar with. When I first started getting into writing as a hobby back in 2003, let's see, I came up with his character, I think 2004, 2005. So I know the character very well. He's evolved a bit over the years. And when I first came up with him, he was in a different setting. He was more like in a modern setting with the storytelling that I was doing at the time. So I kind of transposed him more into this like medieval type of setting. But he's probably my favorite character to write, and he's also one of the more difficult ones because of the way he speaks. He doesn't use any sort of contractions when he speaks. So I have to like when I'm writing him, I'm like, okay, how do I make him say this line without it sounding dumb, or like how, like, just his actions. He's very calculating, and he's he knows a lot more than he lets on. And that's going to be explored a bit more in later books, why that is.
And Aaron said there's a character for everyone to dislike and enjoy. And also has a question: which authors have influenced your writing? Do you think Christopher certainly got some vibes? Would be interested to see if I was correct.
I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but I've already said it a few times. I actually don't do a whole lot of reading at all. I've read very few books because I just have an overactive mind. I'll be sitting there reading a book, and I can only get a couple of pages before it's almost like just like anxiety in a way. Like I have to put it down. I just start getting like flustered and overwhelmed with it. I did do the audiobook thing for a while when I was working at my last job. I had so much time during the day to do audiobooks. So I listened to Song of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin, First Law, Joe Abercrombie. Started getting into Sanderson a little bit. I'm about halfway through Name of the Wind. So that's really all I'm familiar with.
That's interesting. I have a son who loves to write, will not read at all. And it's like a disconnect in my head, but again, just wakes up full of ideas for stories and just would write continually all day, every day with no problem whatsoever. And I'm like, this is bizarre. I can't identify with that at all. So it's interesting that you're the same, Christopher,
Well, yeah, I mean, so if anything I write unintentionally rips somebody else off, just know, full disclosure, it wasn't intentional because I don't read. But in a way, I think it kind of gives me a little bit of an advantage too, because I'm not so overwhelmed with other people's ideas and stuff that it kind of contaminates what I'm doing. So
Sure. And Bryce is going to film that review today.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it.
Jeremiah said, I found Hellborn King on Steve's channel. Actually, was the last time Chris was on, I bought the books. Oh, cool.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah. And Jeremiah had a question. So wait, is Delhaven the Dells?
Being from Wisconsin, so there's this place called Wisconsin Dells. Actually, no, it wasn't intended that way. I'm really bad with names, really bad. Like, I can remember a face endlessly, but names I really struggle with, and I struggle to come up with names. And sometimes I'll just be jumbling some mishmash around in my head and just like, and if something sounds interesting, I'll write it down, and then I'll just try to piece other words. So Delhaven was just something that just kind of I just came up with. I don't know how I did it. It was like, oh, thank God, I came up with a name. Now I just got to come up with like 20 more.
Well, all the names, I struggle a lot with fantasy character names that are really long and really like complicated. So thank you for keeping them simple and
for sure
straightforward.
I tried to still give them a fantasy feel to it. I did have a friend of mine who during beta reading was like, some of these character names, they just sound a little too modern. You might want to spice them up a little bit, make them sound more fantasy-esque. So I went back and adjusted a few names here and there. But I try to still give it that fantasy feel to where characters have a bit more exotic names, but I didn't want them to be like that long.
Yeah.
Sure. Or spelled so ridiculously that you have to have like a glossary at the end of the book where it's like phonetically telling you the pronunciation of the character name.
Yeah, there's going to be little variation in how people pronounce your names. If they're running to you and to be going, who are you talking about? Because
right,
you've got a different pronunciation of it.
And that's fair enough. I mean, I'm not going to get all pissy if somebody mispronounces a character name because hey, that's perfectly fine.
And what the idea for the wagon with the severed heads? Where did that come from? Is that something that just came to you in the moment, or was that planned?
Something I wanted to, in order to provoke this military response by Cedric. It's like, okay, so the barbarians are going to have to do something pretty ghastly to kind of draw him out from his castle. And so I was like, well, why don't they just send a wagon of severed heads back to the castle? And so I don't know, it just kind of popped in my head in the moment. It seemed like a pretty shocking thing to do. They would provoke an irrational response, and they accomplished that.
Got their attention for sure.
Definitely.
It's a great scene for. I was going to say it's a great scene for a TV adaptation of it someday too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cedric's son was out there leading that patrol, so that was another reason for let's make this as shocking as possible, so that he comes and tries to save his son, and it ended up working in their favor.
Yeah, and that whole scene with Cedric pushing his men and the horses and everybody to the point where they're all exhausted, you just knew that something bad isn't happening. It's like this isn't going to work out well for him, because they kept trying to tell him, we're tired, we need to rest, if we can't fight if we find anyone anyway, so let's just slow down. And he was determined, and didn't work out too well for him.
Yeah, I had some people tell me that that whole thing of driving your soldiers too hard, like past the point, like that's unrealistic, like that wouldn't happen. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I sort of based that whole progression off of an actual battle. I can't remember the name of the battle, but it's sort of loosely adapted in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, where the Crusaders, they feel that they're unstoppable, and they go out into the desert without water, provisions, and then they end up suffering the consequences. So I use that particular battle, I cannot remember the name of it, as sort of an inspiration for the motivation of pushing on when you really know you shouldn't, because you're just so hell-bent on vengeance that you can't see common sense. His officers were protesting and saying, sir, we need to stop, because if we get attacked now, we're screwed, we're dead. And he's just like just so blinded by vengeance that it ends up costing him. And I try to give each character sort of a singular negative trait. So like Cedric's is blind vengeance, Madeline's is blind ambition. Like every character has a certain negative trait that drives them forward, in addition to the positive traits.
Nice. Blind ambition, I get it. Yeah.
And Tori said, well, I'm intrigued, I just downloaded the book. Hope you
awesome.
enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
Hope we don't. Well, we're spoiling everything, so hopefully it doesn't take away from your experience. Aaron said, interesting indeed. Do you feel anything influences your story ideas? P.S. I get hints of A Song of Ice and Fire and First Law, but overall the story stands out.
Influencing story ideas? Not really. The first two books I kind of wrote in my head when I first decided, hey, I'm going to write a book. And so I was just, kind of getting an idea in my head of what I wanted this to look like. I knew I wanted to have a big war at the center of it. Everything else just kind of came naturally. And in a way, the story is just sort of telling itself. But I'm a huge fan of movies, especially, like medieval type movies, action, adventure. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's little parts of that's influenced me along the way, but nothing specifically I can point to and say I'm a clone of this, or like I'm writing something that's competing with that. It comes organically to me, but if it's similar to something else, like Song of Ice and Fire, it is what it is.
And speaking of A Song of Ice and Fire, Chris, you made this comment earlier about, because it's still fresh in our minds, House of the Dragon and the family drama. What did you pull from that in this one, the family drama stuff?
Yeah, so again, this line of succession, and actually the feelings of the kids in either not being prepared or not being ready to seize the throne, and the problems that then causes. You know, like obviously Gareth, Lucetta, and Trace is like a non-event at the moment, but still obviously a very prominent member of that family in some way, shape, or form. Gareth knowing that he's supposed to step up, and then obviously dealing with the problems that he has with it, but then just drinking and just not knowing who he is. I think is pretty much the classic male trope of like, I'm a useless human being until a certain age of life, until I figure it out. And then Lucetta's sort of, I mean, her ambition, but also her narcissist side of herself, you know, where she just feels that she is more important and feels that she's the person best placed to do it, even though she's not aware of who she is as a person either. It's very like House of Dragon, and a lot of the people that would be king there or see themselves in a place that people have very poor understanding of who they are. So I find that to be very clear.
I have not seen House of Dragon yet,
yeah.
So I cannot speak to it. So don't spoil anything, because I do eventually want to watch it, but I wanted to give it at least a full season before I got invested in it, because I got so burned by Game of Thrones season 8. I hated it so much, man. But in a way, I owe Game of Thrones season 8 for me wanting to write a book, because when it was over, I'm like, my God, this is terrible. And I was like, if I feel I can do better, why don't I give it a try? I want to write a book. I've always wanted to do something like that, and so I used that as bad as it was. I used Game of Thrones season 8 as my main motivating factor for writing Hellborn King. So. But yeah, I want to give House of the Dragon maybe another season before I get into it, and I'll end up binging the whole thing. But I hear very good things. So far.
Tremendous.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
John says, I think it's an asshole author who doesn't who gets angry if someone mispronounces a name. Yeah. Not too good.
Well, especially in the fantasy genre, like you're gonna mispronounce a name at some point, you know.
Oh yeah, I do it all the time. Aaron said, interesting. Yes, TV adaptation. And John said, that's when you know you have done character work well, Christopher, when characters have different motivations and desires, something you did really well.
Thanks, John. I'm gonna have to get at your book. I don't know if you have an audiobook for that. I think that's the only way I'm really gonna be able to read it, unfortunately, because like I said, I just can't read, man. My mind just short circuits and overloads. And I mean, there's books sitting in my living room that I've barely read just because I can't. And then it's like, well, I've forgotten everything I've read, so now if I want to read this, I got to start over.
Yeah. Tori Talk said, it doesn't with Grimdark. I tend to be more picky, so the conversation around the book actually helps me want to read it more.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so spoilers. And Aaron really enjoyed the siblings dynamics.
That was drawn a little bit on some personal experience too. I'm the oldest of 4, and when do siblings ever get along? And I've had a very interesting family dynamic over the years, and so I didn't want to explicitly put like one of my family members in the book. Aside from the Queen, that was kind of a tribute to my mother and some of the challenges that she had to overcome. But as far as my siblings go, I didn't put them in the book, but some of those interactions, some of the rivalry, and just some of the things that they experience, and the butting of heads and everything that I have experience with, and so I wanted to put that in the book and just kind of draw from that experience.
And John said, no audiobook yet, but I'm hopeful for future. That shit's expensive.
Yeah, very expensive. Well, I did a royalty share agreement with my narrator. So for the life of the book, he gets half of what my cut of the royalty is, and then it was like $2,500. So I mean, it's not cheap, but also not absurdly expensive either. So.
Yeah. And John adds Game of Thrones season 8 plus COVID and an overwhelming surge of new authors.
Yep. I am one of them.
Jeremiah had a question. Is Marcellus the Hellborn King? Is knowing the answer to that question a spoiler for future books?
You know, you are only the second person, Jeremiah, that has ever asked who is the Hellborn King, and I can't get into that. I can't get into that.
I just assumed because there's a cover with a character and the Hellborn King emblazoned right across his feet that was not.
Well, maybe it is, but maybe
it could be. Yeah.
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's something else, or maybe I just want to stir up some controversy and get people talking on it. So I'll just be vague about it.
I like it.
I always thought it was someone from the past who set these events in motion. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards, but maybe I'm wrong. But don't tell us. But that's kind of what I had in my mind.
I am working on a prequel to the series, so it will take place just before the bloodbath at Borgifa, so you'll get a better idea of how it started. But at the same time, it's also going to be one of those things where, well, yeah, this person did that, they're bad. They did this, they're bad. Great. Like I don't know who the good guy is. You know? So it's still gonna have a little bit of that, but you're gonna get a better idea of what caused the war to break out.
Yeah. Good work, Jeremiah, and teasing out a bit of a story to follow, though.
Yeah, and I think the addition of Lucetta and the Woman in Black it was a nice break from the combat and the military stuff, because they added another layer of what could be like mystery or even horror.
Yeah, I was this close to cutting Lucetta because she that right she has Aldred, she has Trace, but these characters are kind of off doing their own things, and she didn't really have anybody to interact with. And so I'm I'm writing her first couple of chapters, and I'm just like, man, this character is just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this character. And then the idea for the Woman in Black came, and then I got all these more ideas, and then I started tying it into what I had already, and I'm like, wow, everything just sort of just fell into place immediately. And one of the biggest questions people have for me is, who is the Woman in Black? Like what is she? Is she like real, or is she just a manifestation of her psychosis, or like what is she? And of course I can't tell you because it will be revealed at some point deep into the series. You will find out exactly the answer to that question.
It's so fascinating because without Lucetta, I think it's a wildly different book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like Steve said, it's a nice break from the action,
for sure. And
her chapters, especially in Wrathbringer, you'll find it's more suspense and horror driven. I did want to have her chapters in Hellborn King be more of that, and it kind of builds into that, right? Because like the first couple of chapters, like she's seeing things out of the corner of her eye, and the Woman in Black isn't there yet. She goes out on the town in Cardale to explore and just see how decadent it's become and everything. And that's where I painted a lot of the world building in, was through her early chapters. But then once the Woman in Black appears, then it starts getting more suspense, horror, thriller type. And that trend continues in Wrathbringer, and it's just going to get more and more intense as the series progresses.
Any guesses, Chris, for the Woman in Black is?
Haven't got a clue. I have to say, I'm one of those readers that is just very happy to have it presented to me at some later stage. I'm in no rush, other than, the only real question in my head is it a manifestation or is it a person? That's really the only thing. I suspect it's much more interesting if it is a person or it is somebody that was around or otherwise,
Well, reading Wrathbringer is going to frustrate you even more, because it's it's going to be like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have in my head that certain people have been reading along, like Marilyn, etc., and Dom's Discord. Just keep on going. A bit of everything is spoilers, apart from I hate Lucetta even more after reading certain chapters, which is just makes you want to just pick it up and read it even more.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my beta readers, his name is Chris. He is a simp for Lucetta. He absolutely loves the character. It's his favorite character. And then I have other friends who just love the character. And then there's other people that just cannot stand her. They want her to die so bad. And I love it. I love the passion. I love the debate. I love everybody's different viewpoints on the characters.
I think, I'm wondering if the Woman in Black is part of the reason why the king is the way he is. If that's something that's been around pulling strings for a while in the family, or trying to steer things a certain
Oh.
direction. It's kind of what I had in my mind with it. But
It's interesting theory,
Mhm.
but of course I can't comment on it. So.
No, of course, no, don't tell me. Aaron said, "Man, almost killing Madeline and Lucetta. Glad you did a U-turn."
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, me too. I think the book would have been nothing near what it is, and I think the series as a whole would not be what it's going to be if I had gotten rid of those two characters.
Yeah. That's cool. At what point did you insert in, like, how many revisions do you do, Christopher, when you're going through of, your broad outline, say you've got your big battle, you're fitting your characters around it? Is it a case of we have a family but we don't know what to do with them, and then just getting to a point and adding it in, or kind of saying, oh, I need to add something here?
Boy, that is a good question. Well, I try to do the first draft, telling as much of the story as I can, and then when I do my first read through, if something is lacking, absolutely I go back in and add more. I would say I do maybe about, let's see, there's my initial first draft, and then I do at least 3 rounds after that of just going through it, and I'll set it aside for a couple of weeks and come back to it with fresh eyes, and just be like, this just doesn't really work for me, or this is good, but I need to add more. And then of course having beta readers to give me feedback. I mean, Chris, who read the book for me, a friend of mine, he had so many good suggestions. I mean, book 1 and 2 would not be what they were if it wasn't for him, and just certain things he's pointing out, like, hey, I really like this, but I needed more. Or I think you went a little too much here, and so just kind of getting that feedback really helped me, just smooth it out and get it as polished as it could be.
And kind of a follow-up to that, John had a question. Do you prefer editing or drafting, Christopher? Drafting for me is super easy, and editing melts my brain, but I've heard there are monsters out there who feel the opposite.
For me, it's the opposite. I am that monster. Drafting for me is a little difficult because I want to try to get it perfect on the first try, and I know I can't, but like I'm super critical of everything I'm doing. And so drafting is kind of a slog for me. Editing actually comes pretty quickly. You'd be surprised how fast I can go through 3 or 4 rounds of editing. Damn it, Christopher. Yeah, I am that guy. Yeah. I mean, I enjoy drafting more than editing, but just editing, it's a lot faster. It's a lot less stressful.
Yeah, there's a process to it. I suppose the same for, well, sort of similar in the making content thing that myself and Steve do. In my head, the recording takes 20 times longer than the actual edit, and even though the reverse is true, I could spend 4 or 5 hours editing without a problem. And the 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes of recording a short video absolutely kills me sometimes. And I'm like, I cannot get in the headspace to get that bit done so that I can do the latter.
Yeah, I mean, because you want it to be, well, I mean, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but you want it to be as good as it can possibly be, and you don't want to make an ass of yourself. And like me, I'm a little self-conscious about my writing because I never want to disappoint anybody. So like whenever I get like a poor review or something, like I feel like I let somebody down, and so so when I'm drafting, it's just like, man, you got to nail it. Like it's got to be perfect. And I know, and so that causes a lot of stress. And sometimes I'll literally just sit here like this, just staring at the TV going, I know what I need to write. I just can't do it because I'm like, I've psyched myself out now to where I can't just flow and be creative.
Definitely should be a support group for that.
I should start a support group for me. Help me write.
Yeah.
Help me stop procrastinating, and just get it done,
Yeah. Well, I mean, seeing how well the series is done within the last month and a half. I mean, that's really been the kick in the ass I needed, because it's like momentum is starting to build now. The book's been out since April 2021, and it's just now starting to get some really serious traction. It's like, man, I can't slack now. I got to redouble my efforts and really get it done. So that's why I'm thinking of maybe dropping the prequel next, because it's going to be novella length. But I feel it would be more appropriate after book 3. So I'm kind of working on both of them at the same time. And depending on my mood that day, I'm like, well, I really want to do book 3. So I'm working on that. And it's like, well, but I really feel like I need to get this prequel out there. And it's, so that's kind of messing with me too.
Aaron asks, was going to ask what your desert island book would be, Christopher, but as you've said, you're not a big reader. What would be your one form of entertainment?
Oof. Well, oh boy, one form of entertainment. I am a huge movie and music junkie. But if I'm stuck on a desert island, it would have to be music. So that's a whole other discussion because I have such a wide spectrum of music I listen to. But God,
your desert island album, what would it be?
Oh, why would you do that to me, Steve? Boy, I mean, I like a lot of neo-folk music. So if you don't know what that is, bands like Vordruna, Heilung, it's basically like old, like Norse type of tribal music, but like done with a modern touch. I also like a lot of power metal, like Camelot's one of my favorite bands. And then like mood music I listen to, like Catatonia. So if I had to choose like one band or one album, I would probably just jump in the water and drown because I wouldn't be able to pick. So I just end it. I can't decide.
The decision-making process would be too stressful to even consider going in the desert island.
That's right.
And Aaron also asks, what would it be for you, Chris and Steve? No, that's a tough one. I don't know.
I think the easy answer for me is to pick a TV series because I kind of have like a Mount Rushmore of TV series. So something like The West Wing or Friday Night Lights or something like that would be, something extensive. You can make your way through multiple times and kind of get something out of it each time. Whereas music, like, it's just impossibility. You've got to be kidding me. One of the best things about music is the fact it's variety. So the fact that you wouldn't have the variety would, I think, hurt its power to do things.
Interesting. I think if I had to pick one, that's a tough one.
You started off so confidently there, too.
I know. Well, I kind of had an answer in mind after you mentioned West Wing. I was thinking something like Curb Your Enthusiasm or something like that, or maybe Lost. I don't know. But Lost, there's some rough seasons in there. So
man, there is.
Sure. Yeah. Tough one. Sopranos, maybe, or I don't know. I was gonna say Dark. I like Dark, but there's only 3 seasons. That wouldn't keep me busy long enough.
Right.
Yeah. So
Dark
actually hurts it. Oh, that's great. Jeremiah, so is the next book coming out in 2023? Is there an expected month of release yet?
That's a lot of pressure, man.
If you could give a day of the month as well, that would be great.
Well, I mean, I would like for all the books to be fairly consistent in length. Hellborn King is 204,000 words. It's like 643 pages. Wrathbringer is just a little bit longer. Book 3, I would like to kind of keep in that ballpark. Wrathbringer was actually supposed to be about 250,000 when I first started, and it just kept getting shorter. That took, let's see, Hellborn King from concept to completion took a year. Wrathbringer took about a year and a half. So maybe a year. I don't know. It all depends on how easily book 3 comes to me, and also depends on my work schedule too, because I have a new job and it's going to be very demanding during the winter. So my writing time may not be as abundant as it was, but I'm going to do my best to get it out. And please don't quote me on this, but maybe late 2023 or early 2024, unless I put the novella out first, which could be, spring, summer. I don't know. All depends. I still don't know which one I want to put out first.
Jeremiah says, stuck on an island with Heilung. Is that
Heilung? Yes, good choice.
Heilung.
Good choice. I've listened. It's interesting because certain characters I have certain like playlists. So like all the Einar, all his music is like Vordruna, Heilung. It's all like the neo-folk stuff. Lucetta's a lot of black metal just because it's dark and it's brooding, and Gareth is more like sort of like upbeat, medieval type of music. Like there's a lot of good like 3-hour long YouTube videos where it's just like medieval music, you know, and I just listen to that. Or they're, you know, so every character has a playlist pretty much. And I think that's another reason why I'm kind of struggling with book 3 is it's like I've already ran through my playlist so much. I have nothing new to listen to. So I'm like going on my favorite bands, Facebook pages and saying, when's the next album coming out? I need it.
I needed to finish my book.
Yeah.
John said Steve Lost would be the worst reminder that you're on a desert island. What are you doing to yourself? Yeah, but as Aaron mentions, it's meta, so it could relate to it.
Imagine if you found a hatch while you were on the desert island, though, and you were the whole thing would just go off.
Yeah, that'd be. I don't know. I'm not sure if that'd be good or bad. So, was there? If looking back on book 1, was there anything that you would change, like any story element that you would change, or any death or a character that you kept alive that you thought maybe I should have killed that person?
I think story-wise, everything is how I like it. I think just the actual nuts and bolts writing is what I would do differently. But I mean, that comes with experience. I mean, you're going to read Wrathbringer, and it's going to feel like a much more polished, upgraded version of the Hellborn King. I mean, Blaze from Under the Radar SFF Books read it and said it's 10 times as good as Hellborn King. It blows it out of the water just because my skill as a writer progressed such a great amount in such a short amount of time. But yeah, I mean, you know, I've been tempted to go back into it and do, you know, like a second volume or a second edition of it. But it's like, you know what, I kind of just want to leave it as it is. And I think we talked about this last time I was on, you know, just love it, warts and all, you know, just love it for what it is. And people can read that and just see where I started. And then, you know, as the books progress and I get better at my craft, you'll be along for the ride. So, I mean, there's nothing story-wise that I would change, but it's just sometimes the writing, I mean, sometimes I'll be flipping through it for reference back on something. I'm just like, oh, I could have done so much better, but it's like, you know, you got to get it out there at some point. And I could have sat here for 10 years and just kept going over it again and again and again, but you got to get it out there, you know?
I think that'd be a really weird thing that if it's accepted that the step up from book 1 to book 2 is great for so long, then you go back and do a second edition of book 1 again, people read that again, and then all of a sudden they're talking about, it's a bit of a step down.
Yeah.
what would that do to you?
Oh God, I'd be losing a lot of sleep over that.
For sure.
No, I like the idea of just leaving it as what it is, and it is, you know, that place and time.
Exactly.
And Jeremiah says Wrathbringer was awesome.
Awesome. Glad you liked it. I poured my heart and soul into that one, and I feel that's probably going to be the book to beat in the series. It is a definite step up from Hellborn King, just in terms of my ability to tell the story. It become, you know, like I had a couple of people say that, yeah, you know, Hellborn King was good, but you could tell in a few areas it was a debut, and there were some teething issues that started out, you know, but Wrathbringer, it like I've got it figured out, and I'm bringing my A game, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it, especially the twists and turns and the cool things that happen in it. And you'll probably get through it a lot easier than Hellborn King because the chapters are shorter. So I think I only have one chapter that gets into that like 7,000 to 10,000 word range, but most of them are like anywhere from 3.5 to like 5.5, 6,000 words in length. And that really drives the pacing because without giving it away too much, spoiler alert, there's battles in my books. So there's a battle that happens in book 2, and there's sort of like this frantic pacing leading up to it. So I think you guys will enjoy that by an order of magnitude over the Hellborn King, and I can't wait to get back on here and talk spoilers for book 2 with you guys. So
that'd be good.
Yeah, definitely. I'm starting it after this. I've been waiting. It's been
sweet.
It's sitting on the shelf waiting for me. So
you have to let me know what you think of the prologue too.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me know if it hooks you the way the first one did.
And with the battles and the violence and the you know, the fighting, was there ever a point where you thought, am I going too far with this? Did I ever give you pause and say maybe I should tone this down a little bit, or maybe I shouldn't send severed heads, or yeah.
Well, as far as the graphicness of the violence, no, but when you're writing, you got to walk a pretty fine line between writing too much and not enough. And I saw you had said, Steve, like the book gets a little wordy in a couple of areas, but then other people will say it's not wordy enough. So I think it all depends on sort of your taste as a reader, your preference. Yeah. So especially with battles, man, it's so difficult to keep it fresh, to keep the action moving, and you're just not repeating the same thing over and over again, not describing the same sword swing or the same charge over and over again. So that can get a little tricky sometimes.
More reasons that could be an author.
Yeah, combat. I did enjoy the combat a lot. A lot of authors write combat, and even though it's good, it goes on too long, and then there's pages and pages of it. And it's like I don't care.
Right.
I
enjoyed the combat.
I start skimming and scanning at that point. You kind of go, right, okay, we've got more butchering, taking of heads, chasing groups, setting on, just kind of go through until you get a moment. But that didn't happen in this book at all.
Yeah, see, I cut my teeth on writing in competitive, free-form, browser-based roleplay. Good luck saying that 3 times fast. So there's this one site where you sign up. It's basically just all role play. Like you create your own nation, you create your own characters and culture and all this stuff. And sometimes on the forums, you would get into wars in battles with other people, and you would have to competitively, but also kind of cooperatively fight these battles out. And so I kind of brought that experience into the writing, except I'm not role playing against another person. I'm trying to do it within the context of a story here. So that's why I think my battles kind of drive the way they do, and they don't get stale, because I'm kind of bringing that like competitive, like, all right, I'm going to do this and that, and then here's the response, and then here's the response to that, and it just goes. And then like the battles are usually, well, let's see, there's 3 in Hellborn King, there's a couple in Wrathbringer. They go quick. I mean, could I have dragged them out for like half the book? Sure, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep the pacing going and keep the action, flowing, and keep it exciting to read.
Yeah, thanks for keeping it short and sweet.
Tried to.
Especially the battle for the castle, where they kind of did it in 2 stages. They kind of threw the bodies at it to show that was falling. Then they went back and said, right, let's do it properly. And then the battle was again very quick because they had prepared effectively.
Yeah, and I tried to. It's very tough because I tried to write this long epic fantasy with all this depth, and I try to do it as concisely as possible. So from the time of that first battle, when the Zalmacians are charging the walls and they get beaten back, to when they're ready to attack it again, there's weeks and weeks that go by, and trying to describe that and lay that out without it getting too confusing, that can be tricky too. Because the book starts out, it starts out like late spring, early summer. I'd say early summer, and then by the time it ends, it's getting into like late summer, fall. So trying to keep that sense of time, like where you are, and not get everything jumbled up. Like, wait a minute, he just said it was like 95 degrees, but now it's like there's snow flying. Like what the hell happened? So trying to keep all that straight can be a process, especially when you have 7 POVs and they're all in different places and doing different things,
And John commented, battles are a weakness of authors, both trad and indie, because so many people have very difficult time not outlining every single motion, movement, or repeating descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I learned from writing Hellborn King was, and this is some advice for all the indie authors out there, or people who are just starting out: trust your reader. You don't have to over describe everything. You can just trust them. Just describe what you need to get out there. You can imply some things, but you don't have to go into just crushing, grueling detail on every little thing. And that's something I kind of learned along the way, because with Hellborn King, I didn't trust my reader enough. With Wrathbringer, I trust my reader. I'm confident in it, and I think it's going to show.
Nice. And Jeremiah, wow, that website was basically his writer's workshop. That sounds like it kind of sounds fun. The competitive and cooperatively writing things like that.
Yeah, it was. It was a blast. I did it for like 10 years, 12 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And John is a fan of your shirt, Christopher.
Yeah, man. I gotta shamelessly plug. I gotta represent the brand. So
Nice. And I do have a prediction before we wrap up, but I think Damien made a mistake with letting Madeline live because Damien created the next Damien. That's my prediction.
I think that's what he. I think he knew that was going to happen, though. I think that was, or that he's trying to prevent, if you know what I mean, by doing what he did there in some way.
Well, see, he was kind of stuck in a no-win situation because the prophecy the crone said is, if you let her live, you're doomed. But if you kill her, then you're going to be cursed. So, and he's like, well, great. This is a lose-lose situation. But what do? So it's like, I'll let her live, but I'll try to make sure that she can never raise up arms against me again. It's basically so that she's just a broken husk of a human being for the rest of her life. And then he thought, hey, this is like the perfect middle ground, and then what happened ended up happening.
Yeah, that always makes me think that, though, a bit like you're saying, Steve, that by doing what he did there is what letting her live and her coming back destroying is actually what caused it, rather than just kind of, if he'd let her walk away, then maybe it wouldn't have happened. It's very much his actions were preordained by prophecy.
We'll see if I'm right.
Yeah.
We will see. We will see.
I think he's underestimating. I think Damien felt like he's underestimating Madeline, but also he's getting a little too confident. Well, not too confident, but he's, they've been on this warpath and they've been getting some victories under their belts, and so maybe he didn't. But yeah,
yeah. And then the part where, and I've had a couple of readers comment on this, like, well, that's kind of crazy. Like, why'd you have him do that? Like when he tried to get Madeline to be his queen. So that was not a proposal of like love or anything. It was, she's the last of this bloodline, this like sacred bloodline that was the chieftains of this, the Cornish people. They're basically like, the early settlers of the continent, like the proto Batanthians, the proto all the tribes, like they were the first ones to come to Kaldakis. So in the Eveldanir, were their spiritual leaders, they were the tribal leaders, the war leaders, and through the visions of Lazareth and her prognostication, it's like, well, Madeline is the last of this line, and Damien's like, okay, well, that's a really powerful tool, not only for the blood magic that she has in her, that he suspects is in her, but propaganda. Hey, here's the commander of the Blackthorn Knights, Batanthia's border guards, this prominent military order. She flipped sides and now she's with us. I mean, so he sees all these positives of bringing her in and making her part of the warband, but obviously because of his cruelty and killing Corbin and everybody else, Madeline's just like, no way in hell am I going to do that. You're crazy. So even in the face of death, when she probably should have done that to save her ass, she probably should have just accepted the offer and then just maybe plan an escape later. But because she was just she just could not get over what happened, and rightfully so. I mean, it was a massacre. She decided, you know what, you can take your offer and stick it. I'm not going to do that. And then he Damien's like, well, great. Now what do I do? Can't let her live. I can't kill her. Yeah.
Jeremiah said Damien really did not try to persuade Madeline. 3 days among his people didn't seem enough. I think that is his hubris.
That's exactly what it is. Yep. Yep. It was I mean, well, part of it was that they had to get on the move too, because winter is coming, but but they had to get on the move, and he's like, you need to make this decision. You're not going to have all the time in the world. Here's the deadline. Give me your answer. And Marvath Bone Splitter, who's a character some people talk about because he's kind of one of those noble savages as well. He did a pretty good job of saying, hey, you know, we're not all, you know, just mindless murderers like you think we are. And then he helped her, you know, through sort of like an ayahuasca type concoction, you know, commune with her ancestors. And he, you know, he thought, you know, that would be enough convincing for her to sign up, you know, and accept Damien's offer, but it wasn't. And Damien thinking, you know, like, well, I am the destroyer of Batanthia. I am this mighty unstoppable being. Who are you to turn me down? So yeah, I would chalk that up to hubris. So yeah, it was a good observation.
Yeah,
I'm glad Corbin died. It made sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't spare him. Not that I didn't like him. It just made sense. Like
it just made sense. I wanted Madeline to have a love life, but I wanted it to be kind of secret. Like she doesn't want it to get in the way of her advancement through the order, even though people are kind of whispering behind her back, oh, you know, she's just kind of sleeping her way to the top and she's this and she's, you know, she's really not. You know, she does have this lover who's another high ranking knight that she fell in love with, but it's very much under the table. It's very much, you know, don't show any affection in public. Just one of those things.
See how that works out. I'm looking forward to it. I've been dying to start this. I've been waiting to have this conversation. So anyone who wants to join us for the next one, it is on the 19th of November, same time. So anyone's welcome to join. Just check out the calendar on the forum and let us know if you want to join us, and we'll be picking Christopher's brain more about the next book. See how that works out.
I can't wait. I can't wait, guys. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to the next discussion.
Nice. And Chris, did you have any other questions before we wrap up?
Not at all. Just looking forward to reading the next one, as has been said, and delving back into that world, because there was a few about a month ago since I finished as well. So it's I'm always very wary of God. I'll forget every character's name, you know, everything that happened. And I actually reread Madeline's final chapter because I kind of was going through the comments, people saying how gruesome it wasn't. I don't remember it being gruesome, so I did go back and reread it. And was like, no, it wasn't. It was very much half a page of, you know, kind of, and then fade to black sort of thing. Yeah.
Oh, want to mention this too. The final scene is a perfect roll credits, cue the music scene on the last page. Is like it could be if it's ever adapted, it's gonna be perfect.
I love writing tavern scenes. They are my favorite. I can never have enough of them, and I kind of wanted to end on that note where it's not a POV character that was in the book. So, you know, it's this guy. He's out in no man's land, basically. He has a tavern. He's just trying to support a family in this little backwater, you know, merchant town or whatever. And then in stumbles Titan with this grim warning, and then, you know, just boom, roll credits. It's just, you know, I thought it kind of ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I think it was enough to just sink one last little hook in you and get you excited about the next book.
It was very Man with No Name, kind of westerny kind of. I felt the end of it, you know, the walk in and then he walks out, etc. You know, it's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
good stuff. So, well, thank you, Christopher, for coming by and letting us talk all about the book and your process and your plans and sending severed heads to your enemies and all that fun stuff.
Oh yeah, man! It was great coming back, and I can't wait to come back and talk book 2 with you guys. Really looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it.
Very cool.
So, Chris, where can people find you on YouTube or Twitter, or where's the best place?
Find me on YouTube at.
Sorry.
This Chris was it?
Too many Chris's.
Too many Chris's.
Damn.
Go for it, Chris.
Right. Okay. But my YouTube name is Chris Mohan, MOHAN, and at 7 o'clock Shadow on Twitter when I occasionally post on either.
Yeah. And Mr. Brenning.
Mr. Brenning. Twitter's the best place to find me at Chris G. Brenning. You can also check out my website, which I tend to neglect more often than not, ChristopherGBrenning.com. I'm also on Facebook and YouTube, but I don't really do anything there. But Twitter's the best way to find me.
Nice. So again, it'll be November 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 Central, 5 Mountain, and 4 Pacific. I can't help Chris, you might Chris on top. You might be able to help us with other time zones, but other than that, I get lost with.
Yeah, I'd have to when I retweet, I'll just stick European time zones in there. Probably is a good way to do it going forward.
Yeah. Time zones are my arch nemesis for sure. They're always sending severed heads to me all the time.
Yeah. Is that going to be a thing now? Like with John, like killing animals is his thing. You know?
I think so. I think that might. Yeah, I think it might be.
Yeah. Okay. I might have to have more severed heads in book 3 then. So.
Nice. The more severed heads, the better.
Yes.
And I just want to say thanks to everyone in the chat who came by to interact with us. Had some really great questions and comments. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us and talking with us about the book. Okay. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks again to both Chris's. Thanks for hanging out and for chatting with us. So we'll see you guys. We'll see everyone soon.
Take care.
Have a good night, guys. See you next time.